If you would, open up to Genesis chapter 27. Genesis chapter 27. As you remember from last week, we went through the first 29 verses of Genesis 27. Just real briefly, just a moment or two, you think in terms of knowing that Isaac is at least the age of 100 whenever this story takes place. And as Isaac had told his oldest son Esau, go kill wild game, bring it back, prepare it for me, I want to bless you. And sure enough, as Esau sets out to do that, Rebekah has heard this plan, and she tells her loved agape son, even a sacrificial love that is not of benefit, she tells Isaac the plan. And Isaac's big concern is, what if I get found out as a deceiver? And Rebekah even says, if you get cursed, let that fall on me. And sure enough, they carry out their plan seemingly the way that they want to, and yet even Isaac, in terms of what he's going to do generations before, did not play into these things. But here is Jacob and Esau. And so here he is going through these difficulties, and as his eyes were so old and dim and couldn't see clearly, he had to rely upon his other senses to lead him to what he wanted to be the truth. He knew it was the voice of his son Jacob, but the smell was the smell of Esau. The food tastes like the food of Esau. And even in terms of, because of what they had done with the young skins, he felt like Esau. And so he blesses them with this blessing. And even whenever Jacob comes in so quickly and Isaac asks, how did this happen so quickly? He mocks God and says, it's because the Lord your God caused this to happen. And you realize, if you're going to mock God, you can expect and know that God is not going to stand for that. Now, it seems like here in what we finished up, if you read through the blessing that Isaac gives to Jacob, in verse 27, he says, so he came close and kissed him, and when he smelled the smell of his garments, he blessed him and said, see, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which the Lord had blessed. He says, whenever the Lord blesses you, good things come out of it. Then verse 28, now may God give you of the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth, the best of the earth, and an abundance of grain and new wine. May peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be master of your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be those who bless you. And then you get to verse 30. He says, now it came about as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob. I mean, just as soon as he's left, he says, and Jacob had hardly gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting. All of a sudden, he comes in and he shows up just that quick. And now, seemingly like the timing for the deceivers seems like it's worked out perfectly, doesn't it? They carried out their plan. All of a sudden, here's Isaac, who's given this blessing to Jacob, and yet he thought he was blessing Esau, his firstborn son. And all of a sudden, as this starts to pull together, look at how it continues. Verse 31. Then he also made savory food and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me. He says, I've done just as you have said. I've prepared the food. Here it is before you. Eat it just like you said you would, and bless me. What a moment. Esau is unknowing about what has happened. Isaac now is a little bewildered, a little perplexed. Notice his question that he asks, verse 32. Isaac, his father, said to him, who are you? And he said, I am your son, your firstborn Esau. notice from Isaac's point of view, he already thought he had blessed Esau. And now when someone comes in this way, you can understand why he asked the question, who are you? I mean, he recognizes the voice of his son, no doubt. But this doesn't make sense. Now, you notice real quickly Esau says, I'm your son, your firstborn, Esau. Well, this doesn't make any more sense either. I thought you were just here. And I've already blessed you. Wouldn't you think he'd have to be thinking those things on the inside? I hope you've never been scammed. But if you have, there's a moment where you have a moment of realization. And it hits you. Lonely people are far more susceptible to scams than others in our present world, whether young or old. Loneliness sets in, and we want to believe things that are told us, and then all of a sudden the realization of how much money have I given away? And then it hits. Now, for Isaac, he's been tricked. He hasn't been scammed. But I want you to notice his reaction. Look at the next verse. Verse 33. Then Isaac trembled violently and said, who was he then that hunted game and brought it to me, so that I ate of all of it before you came and blessed him? He says, yes, and he shall be blessed. Isaac now understands something he didn't understand before. He's been tricked. And you think about the way he says it, trembled violently. When you talk about what has happened, and you might wonder why this reaction. What does he know about his blessing that he gave to Isaac? That he gave to Jacob? What does he know is going to happen by faith? Esau is going to bow to him. The descendants of Esau are going to serve Jacob and his descendants. And to think exactly opposite of what I wanted to happen is going to happen. And he trembles violently at it, because if you notice at the end of verse 33, he says, yes, and he shall be blessed. Now here's just a little side thought for us. If you think deception doesn't hurt anybody, if you think just a little white lie here and there is really no fault, then we're the ones that are deceived. And to realize, do you see the pain that the deception has caused in Isaac? It's kind of something, because Isaac's name means laughter, and this is no laughing matter, especially not to him. Now, he continues on here. Look at verse 34. He says, when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry and said to his father, bless me, even me also, O my father. Just look at kind of the way it has to describe it. Exceedingly great and bitter cry. You'll find out here in the next verse or two, he understands exactly what happened as it gets unveiled. He says, I know your blessing is going to affect what happens, and it will turn out that way. He says, do you still have a blessing for me? Could you speak good words about me and my descendants? And then real quickly, looking at verse 35, and I want you to pay attention to the pronoun and figure out who it is, because it's going to be the same pronoun in the next verse, but it's not going to be the same person. Verse 35, and he said, your brother came deceitfully and has taken away your blessing. Who made the statement? Isaac did. He says, your brother. And the realization, what is Isaac completely aware of now? He may not be able to physically see with his eyes very well, but now he knows the truth. He says, your brother. He was very deceitful. Now, why do you think he wants to tell Esau about the deceit of Jacob? Why would that be important? Right. I didn't do this on purpose, Esau. This was not what I aimed to do. Have you ever had situations that go awry and you were trying to get a different, do something in particular, and it just went haywire because of something outside of your own control? And they go, here's Isaac saying, I was deceived. I didn't do this because I wanted to. Richard.
I thought this word. Why was Isaac not able to revoke a blessing? Take it away.
Right. You think about to speak good words in terms of saying, here's what I put in place. And it is interesting. He says, and if you remember, think back to it. Look at the very tail end of verse 29. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be those who bless you. If he turns around and he says, cursed be Jacob, then what's going to happen? He gave the blessing in a way that is kind of irrevocable, right? So whenever you start looking back down here in verse 35, he says, your brother came deceitfully and has taken away your blessing. He has taken away what I intended for you. Then, look at verse 36. Then he said, now pay close attention so you figure out who this he is. Then he said, is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. So who's the he now? Now we're talking about Esau. So got to be careful with these pronouns. He says, is he not rightly named Jacob? And of course, Jacob means supplanter, someone who takes in and takes things that are not necessarily theirs. He says, he has not supplanted me these 2 times? Now, I want you to pay close attention to the rest of verse 36. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing. Look at how he talks about it, these events of the past. He says, he took away my birthright. Now, if you remember, that's what he had sold to Jacob for a bowl of red lentil stew. He didn't take it away. He sold it away. Chuck.
The interesting thing to me is the ultimate determiner of the blessing or the curse is God. And yet God stood behind the words of Isaac in that even though it was a whole messed up deal, I mean, it almost speaks like God thought very highly of the testimony of Isaac, even though it was a bad situation.
Right, and we're going to deal with that here in a minute in terms of going, why does God allow these things to take place? They seem kind of odd things. And so if you take note again in verse 36, he took away my birthright, and that's from Esau's point of view. Because couldn't Esau have waited another day to eat? And yet he chose, I'll sell this over. I'll sell my birthright for a bowl of stew. And then he comes to the next statement in verse 36, and he says, behold, now he has taken away my blessing. Now, is that one accurate? Yes, that one is accurate. He did come in and deceitfully come in and take his blessing. Now, I want you to remember these things, and let's go to the New Testament and get a little bit more. It's amazing how sometimes you go to the New Testament and get more details there than you have in the original story. Nothing like having something hidden be revealed. Look over at Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12. Look down at verse 14. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 14. Pursue peace with all men, and the sanctification without which no one will see the Lord. Now, here are the Hebrew writers, 2 things in particular. Pursue peace with most men. Doesn't say most, does it? All men. Even if they're wretched and wicked? Pursue peace with all men. Now you can appreciate what Romans 12 says. He says, so far as it depends on you, There are times where peace cannot be found, but it's not because of what you're doing. And there's an understanding in that. Pursue peace with all men. Pursuit. And he says in the sanctification, the refinement. I love the way that 2 Corinthians 7:1 talks about it in terms of saying perfecting holiness. You think about sanctification is about learning to do things even better. And to go, yes, okay, this is what happened. Is there a better way to do this? That's more loving, that's perhaps more merciful, perhaps better. He says, the sanctification without which no one will see the Lord. If we're not striving to be refined, who are you never going to see face to face on a good relationship? The Lord. What does that tell us about spiritual growth? If you ever get to the point where you think, you know what, I'm doing pretty good, I'm fine right where I am. Is God okay with that kind of attitude? He is certainly not. He says, the sanctification without which no one will see the Lord. And that's that sanctification process, even after coming into Jesus. Verse 15. And now he's going to take a step back. He says, see to it that no one comes short of the grace of God. What if you don't pursue peace? What if you don't pursue the sanctification? What will you come short of? So how vital is it? It's about the health of your soul. He says, see to it that no one comes short of the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble, and by it many be defiled. The root of bitterness. Now, you can start to think through your own life and the things that you've encountered. Man, what does it take for bitterness to really set in? You got to keep on doing it for a while. And you notice he says the root of bitterness. Now, you think about this. When things take root downward, what usually happens upward? There's something growing above the soil too. He says, here's the root of bitterness, and all of a sudden, what's it going to do when it springs up above the ground? It causes trouble. If you have ever grown a garden, weeds are not your friend. And you realize, what if we really thought about bitterness the same way we think about weeds in a garden? Because what do you know about weeds in a garden? What do you have to do? And you pull them out from what point? The root. Or you want to kill it from the root with something. So he says, make sure that no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble. And does it just affect one person? It'll defile many people. And then notice the illustration he brings up in verse 16. That there be no immoral or godless person like Esau. And notice what he brings up in particular. Who sold his own birthright for a single meal. How did God see Esau whenever he sold his birthright? Godless. Think about immoral. You're choosing to sell your birthright. It is a choice. And notice, in Hebrews 12, he doesn't say it was taken from him. This is not Esau telling his own story and getting to paint it his own way. This is God saying, look, it was sold. You made a decision. It's real easy for things to turn out bad and us to blame somebody else for it. And you realize, and usually what's going on whenever that's happening? Bitterness. And we want to blame other people for our own bad decisions. That's what bitterness is. And whenever it takes root, it can kill us spiritually very quickly. Here he says, who sold his own birthright for a single meal. Then he's going to move on into something a little bit different. Look at verse 17. For you know, he's not telling them a story they're not already familiar with. He says, for you know that even afterwards, when he desired to inherit the blessing. Now we're talking about something different. Now we're talking about our story in Genesis 27. He says, because he made his decision on the birthright, he was already acting in a godless way. he says, even afterwards, whenever he desired to inherit the blessing, what happened? He was rejected. He says, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought for it with tears. There are certain decisions that you make in life that you cannot take back. We can be forgiven for them, but you can't take them back. And you realize he made his decision to sell his birthright. And because he did, what did God allow to happen? You'll be rejected in a blessing too. Now, do you see how impartial God is? Take a notice here. He says, even though he sought for it with tears. There's nothing about crying your eyes out over something you cannot change, even though you wish you could, because of decisions that we made. Now, I want you to see something here in particular. In the previous chapter, look at Hebrews chapter 11, look down at verse 20. Have you ever done things in good faith and it goes to pieces? Like your motives are just fine in what you're aiming to do, but it doesn't turn out well. Have you ever wondered that question? What does God really have to say about that? Does the Lord really care about motive instead of outcome? Let's take a look and find out. Hebrews 11, verse 20. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau. Now, we haven't read Esau's blessing yet, but it's coming. He says, even regarding things to come, in what Isaac was blessing in terms of Jacob and Esau, what did it take from Isaac to do this? Faith. He's responding out of faith to do these things, and in doing them, you see, he says, even about things regarding things to come. Now, I want you to see the outcome of this. Look back in Hebrews 11 to verses 1 and 2. He says, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Is that how Isaac offered this blessing? Was it things he had seen? He can't see hardly at all. And he's even talking about the future here. He says, faith is the assurance of things hoped for. What did he hope for with Esau? Initially, he hoped for good things for Esau. He looked at the future and he says, I want things to go well for you. Yet here's God carrying out his will. God had already rejected Esau, and he rejected him because he took no value in his birthright, about his family lineage of faith. Sold his own birthright. And because of that decision, he's rejected from the blessing, even though Isaac does it in all good faith. And notice the outcome for Isaac. Look at verse 2. For by it, faith, the men of old gained approval. So how it turned out, did God approve? Was Isaac approved by faith? Yes. So you start looking through here. There are times where we get to situations we go, you know what, this is the best decision I can make based upon what I know and what I'm aware of, and you step out in good faith to do it, and then it all goes to pieces. And you sit back sometimes and wonder, oh, Lord, I'm so sorry. And what does he already know? I know why you did it. I know your motive. I know you were responding out of faith in the decision that you made because you were doing it according to my ways. And so what does God do? What do you find? God will grant you approval. Now, sometimes we need that desperately, that understanding. Because sometimes you just don't have all the information. It hasn't been put out in front of you. Do you think Isaac felt like he knew everything that was going on when Jacob stepped in there, dressed with goat skin and having the best garments of Esau on, and this food that his mother had schemingly made? No. But Isaac was doing it out of faith. Now, come back to Genesis chapter 27. So when you look here at the tail end of verse 36, and Esau asks his question, it says, and he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? Is there anything left for me? Verse 37. He says, but Isaac replied to Esau, behold, I have made him your master, and all his relatives I have given to him as servants. And with grain and new wine I have sustained him. Now as for you then, what can I do, my son? He says, I've given you over as slaves and servants to your brother and his family. Now, if you notice how this continues, verse 38, Esau said to his father, do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. So Esau lifted his voice and wept. Is there nothing left for me? Now, I want you to remember the motive. And we'll see it even more clearly here in a minute. You see bitterness at work in the heart of Esau. And God allowed it to turn out this way because of his own decisions he had made previously. And God already knew that it's Jacob who this blessing's going to come from, or come through. And you can look over at Romans 9 to see that on your own. But here you see this point. Does this blessing mean anything to Esau? Does he see this as just mere words of his father? He takes it, if you notice the way he says it, he says he lifted his voice and wept. Maybe you've been one to weep this way. Maybe you've had a family member or friend to weep like this. But they weep so loud that it hurts you. And to think here he is, and he's claiming out. I mean, you think about the way he's talked about it earlier. Cried out. He says, do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, my father. Will you bless me too? Is it just one blessing? Is there nothing left for me? It's interesting. This is kind of how bitter people think, isn't it? Is there nothing for me? Is it always for them? See how bitterness starts to take root and take over? Now, look at verse 39. Here's Isaac. This first part's not going to sound much like a blessing. He says, then Isaac his father answered and said to him, behold, away from the fertility or the fatness of the earth shall be your dwelling, and away from the dew of heaven from above. Now, for an outdoorsman, how does that sound? Man. Says, this is the blessing that I asked for. He says, I'm no longer going to get the fatness of the earth. No more good for me. I want you to see this is what happens when you sell out on what's really valuable in life. When you sell out on spiritual things, this is what happens. Then verse 40. Here's where it turns a bit. He says, by your sword you shall live. Well, that doesn't sound very good, does it? You're going to be at war for the rest of your days. He says, and your brother you shall serve. Is there a blessing anywhere in here? I mean, does this sound like a blessing yet? This sounds more like a cursing. He says, but it shall come about when you become restless that you will break his yoke from your neck. But it's not going to be forever. And if you want to read more about that, 2 Kings chapter 8, verses 16 through 22 is where you should go, because it'll explain how this happens. But it's not going to happen until the days of the prophet Elisha. I mean, it's a long ways off. Now, notice how this continues on into verse 41. He says, so Esau bore a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. Did Esau understand what his father had said? And because of this blessing, what does he hold? A grudge. And he doesn't hold a grudge against his father. He holds the grudge against Jacob. He says, and Esau said to himself, in other words, this is what he's saying in his heart. The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. Now, just take a moment and think about that. Now, we know his father is over the age of 100 when this story takes place. We also know from later on in Genesis that his father is going to die at the age of 180. But as you read this story, Isaac's making statements about, I don't know how many more days I have. I want to give this blessing before I die. And that's kind of the dominoes that come through the beginning of the story. But to think, here's the way bitterness thinks. Now, you answer this for me. What does it take for people to bear a grudge? What does it take? A hard, unforgiving heart. You have to feel like you've been robbed of something. You have to think that you've been slighted. And what's so unique to me is the idea of bearing a grudge. Who bears the weight of it? The grudge holder. Isn't that something? Chuck, you have to make the effort to do it, right? You have to strive to do it. Now, notice how this continues on. He says, behold, your brother Esau is consoling himself. He says, the days of mourning of my father are near, and when he dies, I'm going to kill my brother too. He says, whenever we're done mourning him, he says, I'm going to kill my brother Jacob. I mean, he's already said his heart. If you want to think about Ephesians chapter 4, be angry and yet do not sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Or who are you going to give an opportunity to? The devil. Let's see, is this an anger problem? Is grudge and bitterness out of anger? Most definitely. Then notice how it continues. We've got to move kind of quick here. We don't have much time. He says, verse 42, now when the words of her elder son Esau were reported to Rebekah, does it seem like Rebekah always seems to know what's going on? Like she almost seems like a woman with her ear to the ground. He says, she sent and called her younger son, Jacob, and said to him, behold, your brother Esau is consoling himself concerning you by planning to kill you. Well, I don't know if this was brand new news to Jacob, but I think it might have been. I mean, Jacob already knew he had basically deceived and stolen the blessing. But now to know you're going to reap what you sow is the way it's sounding pretty quick, although we know probably how this story goes from here. He says, and you know what's giving your brother comfort? Looking forward to your death. You talk about a grudge. Have you ever had a grudge so much that you said, you know what, if they walked out in the street and got hit by a bus tomorrow and died, I'd be perfectly fine with it. Then you have a big problem between you and God. Now, notice how it continues, verse 43. Now, therefore, my son, obey my voice and arise, flee to Haran to my brother Laban. Let's see, have we heard her say something like that before, obey my voice? That's what got all this problem stirred up, right? I mean, if you look back in the chapter, look at what she says. This is verse 11. Jacob answered his mother Rebekah, behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, I'm a smooth man. He says, perhaps my father will feel me, then I will be as a deceiver in his sight, and I will bring upon myself a curse and not a blessing. But his mother said to him, your curse be on me, my son, only obey my voice. Remember how much Mama loves you. He says, and go get them for me. He said, just obey me. Now, You see what she says. She says, may your curse be upon me. Doesn't sound like it's on her yet. Because, interesting enough, Esau's not saying, I'm going to kill mom and then I'm going to come kill Jacob. He's saying, I'm going to kill Jacob. He says, just obey me. He says, flee to Haran, to where I came from. He says, go up to where my brother Laban is. Then verse 44. He says, stay with him a few days until your brother's fury subsides. How short-sighted is she? He just needs a few days to cool off. That's all he needs. That's the way deceivers think. Does she really see the truth? Who's really being deceived? She is, as well as Jacob. He says, stay with him a few days, my brother Laban says, until your brother's fury subsides, verse 45, until your brother's anger against you subsides and he forgets what you did to him. I'm sure he'll forget with time. Do you see how deceived she is? Then I will send and get you from there. He says, why should I be bereaved of you both in one day? I want you to notice the statement in the middle, verse 45. Then I will send and get you from there. If you read the rest of the book of Genesis, starting in chapter 28, when does she ever send for him? Never. Never does she send for him. I wonder if he waited to hear from her. I wonder if he ever thought he would get word. You know what? Esau's perfectly fine with you now. Come on back home. We miss you. She never sends word that's recorded. And then notice who this is all about. Her. Why should I be bereaved of you both in one day? Isn't it interesting how deceptive people make it all about them? Now, if you see the statement here, she's as self-centered as they come. Verse 46. Rebekah said to Isaac, now notice who she's talking to. She's no longer talking to Jacob. Now she's talking to her husband. Oh, that she just loves to pieces to deceive him. He says, I'm tired of living because of the daughters of Heth. Once again, who's this about? I'm tired of this, Isaac. Makes you kind of say, I'm tired of you deceiving me. He says, I'm tired of living because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob takes a wife from the daughters of Heth, like these, from the daughters of the land, what good will my life be to me? Now, you might think about the daughters of Heth. If you take a look back at the end of chapter 26, verse 34 and 35, it says, when Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, the daughter of Berai the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah. Hittites were tied in with the sons of Heth, and you can find that later on, or back in Genesis chapter, I wrote down a little note for you. Genesis 23, verse 10 tells you about that connection. So realize what she's saying. Don't make the same problems and decisions that your brother made. Now, let me tell you a little something about these words in verse 46. Those are the last words that will be spoken by Rebekah in the rest of Scripture. That's it. Remember what she told Jacob? May your curse be upon me. Later on, I'll read you all the other times that her name shows up in the rest of the book of Genesis. Genesis 28. Then Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Paddan Aram to Laban, son of Bethuel, the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah. But Rebekah's not talking. Genesis 29:12. Jacob and Rebekah, that he was a relative of her father and that he was Rebekah's son. That's how Jacob introduces himself. He says, and she ran and told her father. Genesis 35:8. Now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried below Bethel. Genesis 49:31. There they buried Abraham and his wife Sarah. There they buried Isaac and his wife Rebekah. Every time Rebekah's name's used through the rest of the book is just about a relationship to somebody, or somebody who died that she's tied to, or her own death. Did she get what she asked for? Yes. I mean, you look at what's here, and you find out, did she reap what she sowed? She certainly did. And you realize for us, here's the major warning. Anger is not your friend unless it's under control. Bitterness, wrath, grudges will separate you from the grace of God. If we're not seeking to be refined in terms of sanctification, if we're not seeking in terms of looking at saying, I want to be refined. If we're going to hold on to grudges and bitterness, it's a curse. And we're bringing it on ourselves. And we need to understand the seriousness of that. Because when the roots of bitterness take down, they won't just destroy you. They'll destroy others with you. And you realize, here where she's at, and as chapter 28 begins next week, you're going to start to see this story take a different picture. But we need to remember Genesis 27, Genesis 26, and Genesis 25 to know this is how wretched Jacob was. This is New Testament thinking, this is the old self. Because whenever he comes back, 21 years later, you're going to see a different man. You're going to see a man who's been humbled. You're going to see a man who's been tricked by many people. And you understand he reaped exactly what he sowed. And so make sure we don't make the same mistakes so that we don't miss out. Pursue peace with all men, even if it's somebody like Jacob. Keep that in mind. All right. Have a great week. Don't forget the key.